Hi, and welcome to this second part of this three-part video series where we're looking at how to customize PySpark streaming by using the applyInPandasWithState functionality. In this video, we're going to do some prerequisite work by setting up a streaming source of data. So what we're going to do is create a series of CSV files that we can stream to a folder. We can then use that as a source of files that we can stream. This video is accompanied by an article on my website, which is www.padsresearch.co.uk, and I will put a link to that in the description. And you can also download this notebook from the same location. So if you just want to download a pre-written notebook, which will automatically start generating streaming files, then you can just download this notebook and use it for your own purposes. I would highly recommend that you subscribe so that you can find the previous and the next video in this series. And you will also be able to see lots of other videos on Databricks focusing on data engineering, data science, AI, and also some maths and physics. So let's get started and take a look at this notebook. So we start off by doing some standard imports. So we're importing some data types, integer, string, timestamp, etc. And then we're also importing our struct type and field type so we can start to build some data structures within this notebook. We are importing the random module so that we can randomize some of the data that we're going to generate, and a few other things like the Spark session and the time, etc. Because I'm running this notebook from Visual Studio Code, I also need to get hold of the Spark session, which essentially grabs it from this connector here. And then we set up our global variables. So I need somewhere to put all of our CSV files that we're going to stream. So we're working within Unity Catalog and we're using volumes. So you will need that set up if you're going to copy this notebook. And we specify our catalog name, our schema, and our volume name. You'll need to swap these over to be your own individual catalog, schema, and volume name. I've got two volumes, one where I initially dump the data, and then the second volume is where I clean up the data that we're going to actually use for our streaming source. So the first thing that we want is a data structure for our streaming source. So we define that here. This is based on the idea that we are an airline and we have a number of flights in the air at any one time, and we want to stream all of that data from the aircrafts back to a ground station so that we can do something with it. So here you can see that we've got a flight ID, so every time the aircraft takes off and lands it gets a new flight ID. We've got an aircraft ID, so that stays the same for the aircraft, doesn't matter what flight it's on. And then we've got a few metrics that we're reading. So we're using the oil pressure, the fuel flow rate, the left and right engine vibrations. We're taking the date time of when we record these values, and then we're also indicating whether this flight has actually landed or not. So this should be an adequate set of data that we can use to stream in our next example. If we look at how we're actually generating this data, we essentially have a while loop. So we're just going to iterate through this while loop for a particular time duration. So I've set this to run for 5 minutes. And this while loop will go through, do its stuff, and then sleep before then going on to the next iteration. So this is going to simulate our stream data. We regularly get sets of CSV files that come in at a periodic time, i.e. we're going to periodically get a CSV file that is dropped into a particular folder. Let's have a look at some of the outputs of this CSV file before we look at the code any further. So here you can see we've got the flight ID, so here we've got 10 records. So you can imagine that we've got 10 flights in the air at any one time, and here is the ID of each of those flights. We've also got the ID for the aircraft, and we've got a number of metrics that we're recording about that aircraft, the date and time stamp of when we recorded it and whether the aircraft has landed or not. So our loop will generate one of these files every second, or any other time period that you want to set. So you can see for this particular flight, for flight ID 1 and for aircraft ID 1, then we've got this set of metrics that have been recorded. And we will keep getting data points every second for this flight ID and for this aircraft until such time that it lands, and then we'll get a landed indicator of that will swap between 0 and go to 1. And in our streaming data, that will say that we can stop holding that set of data in memory once we know that the aircraft has landed. So let's look at another CSV file. So you can see here we've iterated to the next set of flights, so we can assume that all previous 10 flights landed, and now we're on to the next set of flights that we want to stream some data for. And again we get all the metrics and the date and time and whether it's landed or not. So where are we going to put these files? Well, let's drop back into Databricks. And what we're going to do is drop all these files into our schema, the demo schema, into our volume, into landing zone. And then if we pop up a level, you can see we've got two folders. We've got data dump and we've got data stream. So there are our CSV files, and we will continually populate that folder with new CSV files that will then get streamed into our data source. Let's now pop back to the code. Okay, so let's have a look at this while loop which creates our streaming data. The first thing that we want to do is to have a set of 5 records for every flight. So every time it hits 5, we want to say that the flight has landed. So we set the flight landed flag to 1. If it hasn't hit 5, then we say, okay, well, it's just still the normal flight, and we set the flight landed to 0. It's not landed yet. And we're using list comprehension to loop through 1 and 10 so that we basically have 10 flights in the air at any one time. We're going to put this data into a data frame, and therefore we're specifying the schema that we used earlier. So the schema's up here. So we're using this schema, and we're using this set of data, and we're populating that into a data frame. We then write the data in that data frame out to our dump volume location. Now the problem with using Spark on the data frame is that you also get a lot of other information in there as well. So you get a lot of metadata. So to get rid of the things we don't want, we're basically going to move the file into a different location and just take the CSV file with us. So we get all the files in the dump folder. We create a new name for our CSV files. We then pick out the particular CSV file that we want to copy across, and then we use our dbutils to copy the file from our dump location into our stream location. Now there's possibly a neater way of doing this with Pandas. So if we use Pandas to save the files, then we wouldn't get the additional metadata that we don't want. So that would be another way of doing it, which means we don't need to do this copy stage. At the bottom of the while loop, so we've got a few different iterators here. So we've got the total flight data points that we want to take. We've got the flight ID and the total flight data points that we want to take. So we just iterate these basically. And this gives us a few groupings of data. And then we wait a moment. You can set this to whatever you want before we go back into the while loop and recreate the next set of data. So let's quickly remind ourselves of the data and what it looks like. So we've got a flight ID, an aircraft ID. We've got a number of metrics around readings that we want to take about the aircraft. We specify the date, time, and whether the flight has landed or not. Now you can download this file from my website. So if you come to padsresearch.co.uk, I'll put a link to this page in the description, and you can click download here and you can just take a copy of that file. So you can use that for any of your own purposes. And as I say, there's also a written article here that you can follow through if you'd like some further explanation. So now that we have prepared our data, in the next video we're going to take a deep dive into the applyInPandasWithState and look at how we can use that streaming set of data. And you should see a link on your screen just about now. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.